This is Christopher John Bjerknes. It is October 15th, 2025, and I am very pleased to announce that I have just released my new book, Satan's Chosen People. It contains some incredible insights that I have not published heretofore. It is going to revolutionize theology, change the way that people view the Bible from this day forward. I have decoded, deciphered everything in a way that explains everything. It all fits. It fits together perfectly. And I have answered the riddles that have plagued theologians for thousands of years. And the crux of it is that the serpent in the Garden of Eden is the Egyptian god Osiris, the Egyptian god of the afterlife and the underworld, the Egyptian god who is wrapped in mummy wrap, the way that Satan is to be bound up in hell. Osiris is in mummy wrap in the underworld, which the Jews portray as hell. Osiris is the god of vegetation and wine, so Osiris appears in the Garden of Eden. Osiris offers the forbidden fruit of knowledge and immortality, which the God of Israel, Seth Typhon, the Egyptian god of chaos, wants to keep mankind from ever obtaining. So Osiris is murdered by Seth, chopped up into 14 pieces, castrated, spread out all over Egypt. His wife, Isis, recovers his body, reassembles it, and mummifies it. When Osiris is wrapped in mummy wrap, his legs are bound, and he is cursed to lick the dust of the underworld. That is the curse on the serpent in the book of Genesis. Osiris appears with a cobra, an erect phallic cobra on his forehead. He bears a fake beard, which represents his mummy-wrapped bound legs that form the tail of the cobra. Osiris appeared to be a serpent to the Jews who wrote the book of Genesis in the Septuagint in Alexandria, Egypt, in the Greek language. Osiris bears a shepherd's crock and a flail, which represent the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is a grapevine that produces wine. Osiris is the god of wine, and a flail for harvesting olives. The olive tree is the tree of life, and Osiris bears the knowledge of how to make men and women immortal in the afterlife through mummification. Mummification is a process that utilizes many of the herbs of Osiris's garden. Osiris is the god of order, Ma'at. He opposes Seth Typhon, who is the god of emptiness, formlessness, and darkness, the god of chaos. They are at perpetual war with one another in the chaos kampf. Jewish monotheism is the worship of chaos. That is why the Jews destroy pagan idols, because pagan idols represent form, order, intelligence. They are relatable to human beings. They can be seen. They can be understood. They can be defined. The God of Israel is nothingness, darkness, pure evil, absolute chaos, emptiness, formlessness, and darkness, and appears as a black cloud in the Holy of Holies in the temple and many other places in the Old Testament, because it is the emperor with no clothes. The Jews cannot define their God because they worship nothingness, and they pretend that that mysteriousness is intellectually superior to the pagan worship of the gods of order, who can be understood, who are physically real, who often represent our ancestors. They want to destroy all of that order. Their monotheism is the monotheism of Satanism. In the Garden of Eden, Osiris tries to bless humanity with the knowledge of civilization, the arts, agriculture, philosophy, language, mathematics, everything that provides humanity with order. Osiris began as the first king, the first pharaoh. He then became a god. In the Old Testament, in the Torah, in the story of Genesis, Seth Typhon's greatest fear is that humanity emulate Osiris and become knowledgeable and immortal and become gods, as Osiris had done. Seth Typhon wants to destroy all the order in the universe. So he tried to prevent Osiris, the cobra serpent, between the two trees in the tree of knowledge, from bestowing those beautiful blessings on humanity. The Egyptians believed that they had cracked the afterlife, that they had a way to become immortal by transitioning into the afterlife. Seth Typhon wanted to prevent that and resented Osiris very strongly and murdered Osiris. Osiris, the god of wine, provided the intoxicating aphrodisiac of wine to Eve, the first human female, and seduced her. She produced the twins, Cain and Abel. That is tremendously significant in Judaism, because Cain and Abel represent the lower and upper kingdoms of Egypt. They represent the real Egyptians in Upper Egypt, in the south of Egypt, and that is Cain. And Abel represents the Hyksos, who had invaded and conquered Lower Egypt in the north, adjacent through the Sinai to Palestine, to Canaan. The Hyksos worshipped Seth Typhon. In the most ancient form of Egyptian religion, the Egyptians had worshipped Seth Typhon, and they were Seth Typhon's chosen people. As a result, they were blessed to have temples to Seth Typhon and to rule the land from the Nile to the Euphrates, which the Jews have come to call Greater Israel. It became the empire of Ramses II. That is Greater Israel, and that is what those who form a covenant with chaos obtain. They become rulers of the earth, which is Seth's kingdom. Cain slays Abel because Abel made a blood sacrifice. Abel is the Hyksos. The Hyksos were the shepherd kings, and Abel was a shepherd. Seth Typhon relished that blood. The God of Israel loves the aroma of burning flesh. I have solved the riddle of the fruits that Cain offered to the Elohim, to the gods. The fruit that Cain offered was wine. The Egyptians utilized wine as a scapegoat sacrifice for their own blood. That story is told in the story of Ra and his eye, Hathor, which becomes its evil aspect, Sekhmet. When Ra grew old and weak, humanity rebelled against Ra, and Ra sent out his eye, Hathor, turned into Sekhmet, to exterminate humanity and drink their blood. When he saw what was happening, he had mercy on humanity and saw how beautiful his creation, humanity, is. So he proposed producing red-dyed beer. He turned water into wine. He also, in alternative versions of the same story, he said that humanity should create a massive amount of either this red beer or red wine and spread it out in the fields as a substitute for their blood to trick Sekhmet. And they did. They poured it all over the fields, and Sekhmet lapped it up. She became drunk and passed out. And she could no longer continue to slaughter all of humanity. And in celebration of that, Ra had the Egyptians offer wine once a year to the gods as a substitute for their blood. That's how I figured out that Cain was sacrificing wine in the place of blood, and that Cain represents the Egyptians. Seth-Typhon did not want to become intoxicated and pass out on the wine that the Egyptians offered him. At this point in history, the Egyptians had rejected Seth-Typhon in favor of Osiris because they wanted to have the knowledge and order of civilization that was bestowed upon them by the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh dresses up in the same royal attire as Osiris because Osiris was the first Pharaoh. So the Pharaoh wears Osiris's regalia. The Pharaoh has a erect cobra on the forehead and a fake beard that portrays the mummified, wrapped up, bound legs of the serpent, the tail of the serpent of Osiris. And with each new pharaoh who is born or who is coronated, they would celebrate the idea that the pharaoh would bring order to Egypt and teach the Egyptians through the priest class how to enter into the afterlife, which is what Seth was trying to keep Adam and Eve from doing. Samael is Osiris. Cain slays Abel to make a human blood sacrifice that he hopes will please Seth-Typhon, because Seth-Typhon instructed him to follow the course of Abel and become righteous and offer up blood, not the substitute scapegoat sacrifice of wine. So Cain does that, and he makes a human sacrifice of his twin brother. I provide all the proof of that in my book, Abel. Abel has to die so that Seth can replace him. This story of Cain, Abel, and Seth becomes the Jewish pursuit of the Messiah, son of Joseph, who is Abel, and Messiah, son of David, who is Seth. The Egyptians, or in the case of Christianity, the Romans, slay Abel so that Seth, the Messiah, son of David, the king of the Jews, can replace Messiah, son of Joseph, Abel. Abel has to die so that Seth can replace him. This theme occurs over and over and over again. In Judaism, Abel is the Hyksos. The Hyksos are the mythological 10 lost tribes of Israelites. Seth is the Habiru who ruled from behind the throne of the Hyksos. Seth represents the Judahites. The 10 lost tribes of Israel are represented by Joseph, who is the reincarnation of Abel. He represents the Hyksos, who had defeated the Egyptians in Lower Egypt with their chariots and with their compound bows and with their leprosy. And then the Habiru, who were a slave class throughout the ancient world, moved in, and Joseph came to rule behind the throne of the Hyksos and effectively represents the Hyksos. Moses was an Egyptian priest who came to adopt the monotheism of Satanism of the Hyksos. The Hyksos worshipped Seth Typhon. Sigmund Freud famously said that Moses was Akhenaten, the Egyptian pharaoh, who created the monotheism of worshiping Natan Ra, the sun, the solar disk. Freud got it wrong. The monotheism that the Jews adopted was not the monotheism of the beautiful sun. They hate the sun. They worship the moon. The monotheism that the Jews adopted was the monotheism of nothingness, the monotheism of an undefinable God that cannot be portrayed by perishable materials because it is the God of chaos. Chaos is infinitely ephemeral. It can take no form. It can have no order. It can shine no light. It is formlessness, emptiness, and darkness, and that is the monotheism of the Hebrews, the Habiru that they adopted from the Hyksos. Now, eventually, the Egyptians succeeded in chasing out the Hyksos. In other words, Cain slew Abel. The northern and the southern kingdoms, Lower and Upper Egypt, were twins. They were the twin brothers, Cain and Abel. Again, Abel has to be killed, just as Jesus Christ had to die. Following this Cain, Abel, Seth model, he was killed by Cain, the Romans. He died. He was Messiah, son of Joseph, to make way for Messiah, son of David, Jesus Barabbas. Jesus Christ, Abel, the Hyksos, the 10 northern tribes of Israel, had to die so that the Judahites could replace them and obtain redemption and atonement and become Seth Typhon's third chosen people. Seth Typhon helped the Hyksos to conquer Canaan, to establish the city of Jerusalem, and to build a temple to himself in Jerusalem. There was a migration out of Egypt when the Egyptians of Upper Egypt finally chased out the Hyksos in Lower Egypt up in the north. And in that migration, the Judahites, the Habiru, formed Judea, and the Hyksos formed what came to be called the 10 lost tribes of Israelites up in the north. Again, they were pretending to be the Egyptians and copying the idea that there were two kingdoms, upper and lower, north and south. Now, Abel is sacrificed by Cain so that Seth can replace him. The Assyrians sacrificed the 10 northern tribes to obtain redemption and atonement for the Judahites. The 10 lost tribes are represented by Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery To the Ishmaelites, Jesus Christ portrays Moses and Joseph, both of whom in Kabbalah are said to be reincarnations of Abel, both of whom were second-born or later children. Cain was the firstborn because he was the Egyptians who initially worshipped Seth Typhon. Then the Hyksos came in, became Cain's second-born twin brother Abel, and they won over the worship of Seth Typhon. They provided the proper blood sacrifice, whereas the Egyptian Cain continued to sacrifice wine as a scapegoat, as a substitute for human blood, and then learned that he couldn't get away with that. But by that time, it was too late. That story is retold in the story of Esau and Jacob. Jacob gets there first and gives the goat meat to Isaac. Isaac is the reincarnation of Abel. Abel was sacrificed. He was the first human sacrifice. Isaac ended human sacrifice. A ram was sacrificed in his place. The Kabbalists say that Isaac was the rectification of Abel. Isaac is replaced. His birthright and blessings are passed along to Jacob. Isaac dies so that he can be replaced by Seth, be replaced by Jacob. Cain gets cheated out of his birthright, just as he does in Genesis, whereas he is made a fugitive and a vagabond and chased out of the Garden of Eden. What does Cain do when he gets out of the garden of, when he's born outside the Garden of Eden? Adam and Eve were chased out of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword was put in the east of the garden to prevent them from coming in. That flaming sword is the sun. Adam and Eve were blessed with the intoxicating aphrodisiac of wine provided to them by the serpent Samael, Osiris. Cain tried to utilize that wine. He created a vineyard outside of the garden. He planted the grapevine outside the Garden of Eden, and he made wine to utilize as a sacrifice. In that way, he brought Osiris's knowledge of good and evil, of civilization into the world. That is why Cain became the founder of cities and civilizations, which Seth would then steal from Cain. After Cain had murdered Abel, Abel dies so that Seth can replace him. I'm sorry, I'm tired. I've been working nonstop for weeks on end to get this finished. And I'm going to be diving into each of these things very, very deeply. This is just a brief overview of the depth of how all of these things are interrelated. Jesus is also Samael, which means that Jesus is also Osiris. Jesus is the god of wine. His blood wine sacrifice was a substitute for him when he offered it to his apostles in the place of his blood. But that was not sufficient. He had to give up his blood and be killed like Abel, because the Messiah, son of Joseph, is Abel, who has to die so that he can be replaced by Seth. Jesus was buried in the tomb, wrapped up in mummy wrap. Again, this signifies the devil being bound in chains in hell, in the underworld. Seth Typhon does not want human beings to have the knowledge of the Egyptians of how to become immortal and pass over into the underworld. Seth Typhon wants to kill all of the gods of order and all of the people who worship those gods of order. That is why Jews and Muslims are ordered to go around the world and slay non-believers and destroy all of the pagan idols which represent order, which can be understood, which are tangible, physically real. They're actual beings which human beings can relate to. If you ask them to define Allah, if you ask a Jew to define God, they say that they cannot. God is ineffable, unintelligible, cannot be understood, cannot be seen, cannot be represented by any image. That is the monotheism of Satanism. That is the monotheism of the Hyksos and the worship of Seth Typhon. That is not the monotheism of Akhenaten and the worship of order, the worship of holy light, the worship of seed. That is the worship of the darkness of the womb. So let's get into some of the specifics. Again, I'm going to be hitting this much harder and much more deeply. In some future presentations, I'm just giving you an overview of some of these new insights and how they all fit together and explain everything. So Osiris, the god of fertility. In terms of fertility, Osiris offers the fruit of the vine, the aphrodisiac of wine, which makes Adam and Eve lustful and desirous, and in the oral traditions of Judaism, enable Samael, Osiris, to seduce Eve to produce their child Cain. That tree is a grapevine, and it was not only planted by Samael, Osiris, in the Garden of Eden, because he is the god of vegetation and the god of fertility, who provides the intoxicating aphrodisiac of wine to humanity so that humanity becomes fertile. Remember, humanity was initially Adam in the form of an androgyne, and he had to be cut apart. He was initially back-to-back, male and female, with the female in the back. Osiris cuts them apart and then provides them with wine so that they realize that they are male and female, which is what the knowledge of good and evil is, and that they can engage in sexual intercourse. And he provides the wine, which is the aphrodisiac that makes them desirous and lustful of one another, and makes Eve lustful of Osiris, of Samael, so that they can reproduce. Reproduction is another form of immortality. There could now be generations that would replace one another. And the Jews misrepresent that as if that form of procreation as immortality is a curse. Eve is cursed with menstruation and the pangs of childbirth, and they are cursed with bearing children and having to rear them. Everything that is beautiful and wonderful about nature and about Osiris, the god of fertility, the god of immortality, the god of wine, is misrepresented as if evil. And Osiris was taken over by Dionysus in the Greek mythologies and then becomes Jesus Christ. Again, Jesus, as I've been saying for decades, is Samael. And since Samael is Osiris, Jesus is also Osiris. Jesus is also the god of wine, the god of fertility, the god of vegetation, the god of the afterlife. Agriculture, afterlife, the dead, resurrection. Jesus is the god of resurrection. Osiris was the god of resurrection. And vegetation in ancient Egypt. Partially mummy wrapped at the legs. That's the serpent's curse. His legs get mummy wrapped. The Jews talk about how Samael was initially a rider on a camel and had legs, and the legs were cut off and taken away. And then Samael was a serpent cursed to lick the dust. That is Seth Typhon killing and chopping up Osiris and wrapping Isis, being forced to reassemble him and wrapping up his legs in mummy wrap so that his legs become the tail of a serpent and he bears the cobra on his head. And that beard that he has, I think I'm the first one to figure this out, represents his legs in mummy wrap. And the intertwined linen of the mummy wrap portrays snake scales. And we also have the mythology that Satan is to be bound in hell for 1,000 years. And that portrays Osiris being mummy wrapped in the underworld in the afterlife. And again, Jesus was found in the tomb. He wasn't found, but the linen that was used to mummy wrap him was found in the tomb by John and Mary. So it is a retelling of the story of Osiris, but it is a retelling of the story of Osiris as Osiris Samael, the one who brings the poison of wine, the serpent's venom from the grapevine. So you can see Osiris has the two trees, the serpent's crock, which is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It is used both to herd the good sheep and to beat away the evil wolves. He has the flail, which is used to harvest olives from the tree of life. His fake beard forms the cobra's tail, and he has a cobra on his head. His legs are mummy wrapped like a snake. He is bound. He cannot walk. He is cursed to lick the dust in the underworld. And his beard represents his mummified, mummy-wrapped legs. You can see the cobra on his head. That is why he is portrayed as the serpent in the Garden of Eden. You can see his beard is wrapped up in the linen. This is a replication, a mimicry of his mummy wrap bound legs, and it appears like the scales on a serpent. This is the cobra's head, and it becomes the tail of his legs. He is bound like Satan in the underworld. He is cursed to lick the dust, and he cannot walk. His legs have been taken away from him, which is how he is portrayed in Kabbalah. These are the two trees. This is his mummy-wrapped legs, his beard. You can see that his legs are always bound and portray a serpent's tail in the eyes of the Jews. This is Serapis. Notice that he looks like Jesus Christ. He is a syncretized combination of the Apis bull, the golden calf of Osiris, together with Zeus to form this new god that the Greeks used to subvert the Egyptians. Jesus Christ, they got the idea for Jesus by mimicking Serapis, by creating a syncretic god that mimicked Phanes, Protogenes, and Dionysus and Osiris in order to dupe the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans into worshiping this new god who would then destroy them. So Osiris is the Apis bull, the golden calf. During the Exodus, there were Egyptians. Moses himself, Osarseph, was an Egyptian priest. And Aaron, Moses' brother, got together with them, and they cast out of the gold that they stole from the Egyptians, they cast a golden calf. That is to represent Osiris. Osiris and Typhon are perpetually at war with each other. That's what the whole story of the golden calf is about. It is about not worshiping order, Ma'at, but instead worshiping Seth Typhon, chaos, Isfet. Chaos cannot be represented by anything because chaos is nothing. The Apis bull, Serapis, They are all ordered forms which can be understood by the human mind. The Jews want to destroy all understanding, all knowledge, everything that is good, true, and beautiful. They want to spread disorder and chaos. They want to bring the Hyksos in to conquer Egypt. They always open the gates of the nations, which is why they have opened up immigration in all historically European countries. They are allowing the Hyksos to invade, but they replace the Hyksos as the ruler behind the throne in the same way that Joseph replaced the Hyksos as the ruler behind the throne and effectively brought the Egyptians into slavery through usury. This is Seth Typhon. He is an ass-headed god. The ineffable name of the God of Israel is pronounced Ee-yaw. It's the sound of a donkey braying because it is the head of an ass. When a shofar is properly played, it mimics the sound of a donkey. They worship the ass. Antiochus IV Epiphanes saw a statue of Moses and a statue of an ass because they worship Seth Typhon. The early Christians portrayed Jesus as an ass because the God of Israel is the God of chaos. It is nothingness. So with all that said, let's go over the story of Genesis of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. And I'm going to explain to you what it really portrays, how Cain, Abel, and Seth are the Egyptians, the Hyksos, and the Habiru, and how the serpent is Osiris, who is trying to bless humanity with the knowledge of how to create civilizations, with the knowledge of what is good and true and beautiful and what is evil and harmful. He is going to teach humanity how to pass into the afterlife and become a god, just as he himself had done. And this outrages Seth Typhon, who murdered and murders in this story Osiris and takes away his ability to walk and makes him a serpent in the dust, converts him into a mummy in the afterlife of the underworld, and expressly states that he is fearful that they will consume Osiris's knowledge of how to pass into the afterlife and become like the gods. When Osiris obtained this knowledge and the knowledge of mummification, when his wife Isis wrapped him up in mummy wrap and allowed him to enter into the afterlife, he became a god. This is telling the story of how Seth Typhon murders Osiris and how Osiris becomes immortal and how Osiris, the great god, taught humanity knowledge so that humanity could have order, ma'at, so that the Pharaoh could lead as a god among humanity, as an intercessor, an intermediary, a demigod himself between the gods and humanity. And when he passes away in the afterlife, he becomes a god like Osiris and governs in the afterlife. The governance of the Pharaoh is necessary to bring this order. They hate the Pharaoh because the Pharaoh represents order and provides order and sustaining life to the Gentiles. Killing Osiris is equivalent to killing the Pharaoh. They are revolutionaries. They overthrow governments. They open the gates to the Hyksos. They create brothers' wars between the upper and lower kingdoms of Egypt, just as they created North Korea and South Korea, North Vietnam and South Vietnam, China and Taiwan, the American Civil War of the North against the South. This is all a replication of this Hyksos model, which first appears in the story of Cain and Abel and Seth, as I'll get to momentarily. Now the serpent is Samael, Osiris, the god of order, the god of fertility, the god of vegetation in his garden, in his tree of knowledge, providing divine knowledge to humanity so that humanity can become immortal and can become gods the way that Osiris himself became a god. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" So he is asking what Seth Typhon, the original god of the Egyptians, had said. The woman Eve said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, which is a grapevine, and you must not touch it or you will die," which was a lie. That is why in John chapter 8, Jesus said that Seth Typhon was a liar from the beginning and a murderer from the beginning, because he wanted to kill Adam and Eve, and Osiris wanted to make Adam and Eve immortal. And again, Jesus is the reincarnation of this serpent, Osiris, the god of the afterlife, the god of wine. "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Osiris can sympathize and empathize because Osiris was born a man, became the first king, obtained the knowledge which enabled him as king to bestow order on his people. This is Osiris giving humanity that divine knowledge of good and evil so that they can bestow order. He is intoxicating them with the aphrodisiac of wine so that they can make love to one another and have the blessings of children and procreate. Just as they were created in the image of God, they are now gods who can create children in their own image. All of this enrages Seth Typhon, who is the god of disorder, does not want humanity to exist, does not want anything physically real, does not want the uninhibited freedom of chaos to be burdened with order. He wages war on Osiris. He chops off Osiris's legs, and then they are bound in mummy wrap so that Osiris becomes a serpent licking the dust. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her. She got him drunk. As I'm going to show you, that's exactly what the Zohar says. Then the eyes of both of them were opened and they realized they were naked. They got horny. They saw each other. They lusted after one another. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. They were wrapped in mummy wrap. This is Seth Typhon cursing them to be like Osiris, to be like snakes, to be wrapped in mummy wrap, the mummy wrap of flesh, to be kicked out of the garden where they were initially beings of light into the material world, which is the afterlife to the Jews. The Jews view the earth as the underworld, the earth as hell. So when they are expelled from heavenly paradise, they fall down to the earth because they have been mummy wrapped by Osiris in the fig leaves and in the skins that they are given by God. That is them being mummified and sent into the afterlife of hell in the underworld of the earth. The Jews don't see it as them being damned from the surface of the earth into hell. They see it as them being damned from paradise and falling to the earth, in the same sense that the Egyptians believed that they would die in the paradise of Egypt, be mummified, mummy wrapped, given this new flesh of linen, and sent into the underworld. The Jews don't take that step. They view the earth as the exile, the earth as the hell. So Adam and Eve were sent into hell and were mummified so that they could survive in the hell of the earth, not the underworld. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God. This is Seth Typhon, among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" It was Osiris who provided the knowledge of civilization and clothing and art and literature, everything that we value as good, true, and beautiful. And Seth Typhon hated that. The man said, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." She was deceived by Osiris Samael. So the Lord God said to the serpent, to Samael Osiris, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life." So Seth Typhon is cutting off Osiris's legs. He's being mummified, turned into a serpent from once having been a walking god, and sent into the underworld to lick the dust. All the days of his life is all the days of his afterlife as the god of eternity, as the god of the afterlife in the Egyptian underworld. "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." This is setting up for Cain and Abel, who are twins. They are the twin sons born of Osiris Samael and Eve. Osiris gets Eve drunk, and then he fornicates with her. She bears the twins, Cain and Abel. That's also something new that I explained in my book. To the woman, he said, "I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." The Jews are saying that procreation is evil, that childbearing is evil. They want to get rid of all that. They want to become androgynous and immortal so that they no longer bear children. All these beautiful things that Osiris provided of lust and desire and love, Seth wants to get rid of and makes a curse on humanity. To Adam, because he said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you, through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. To the dust you are, and to the dust you will return." The ground is cursed. In the Egyptian mythologies, wine first formed when these humans waged this war against Ra, and then the gods slew the human beings. The blood spilled out onto the ground, and from that, grapevines sprung up. There are three figures in the Bible who love the cursed ground. And it's Adam, Noah, and Uzziah, the king, that planted vineyards. It expressly states that Noah planted a vineyard and that made him evil. And then he was raped and castrated by his son Ham. It was the serpent, Samael, Osiris, who planted the grapevine in the Garden of Eden. It was Cain who then planted the grapevine outside the Garden of Eden. In Genesis chapter 6, God curses the ground again, but cleanses it with the flood and says he will never curse the ground again. But Noah is given a shoot of the grapevine and plants a vineyard and gets drunk on it the way that Eve did, the way that Cain did, and then becomes evil. There are only 3 people who are said to love the cursed ground, and 2 of them planted vineyards, which is another one of the ways I prove that Cain must also have planted a vineyard, and the fruit that he sacrificed to the gods as this Egyptian was the substitute for blood of wine. Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all the living, and being a mother is a curse in the eyes of Judaism. The Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. He wrapped them up in the mummy wrap of flesh and sent them into the afterlife of the hell of the underworld on the earth, in which humanity is in exile from God, from Seth Typhon. And the Lord God said, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. In other words, Adam and Eve became like Osiris. Osiris was a man. He was a king. He understood order. He understood good and evil, and he taught it as Pharaoh to the people, and that elevated him to the status of a god. He learned, and Osiris learned how to mummify and resurrect Osiris. So then he ate the fruit that Isis offered from the tree of life and became immortal and became a god. Seth Typhon is trying to prevent Adam and Eve from following in the footsteps of Osiris, who is guiding them to become gods, as he had done. And the Lord God said, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat it. He ate from Osiris's offering, and they don't want him to eat from Isis's offering of the tree of life. So the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken. After he drove the men out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden the sun, cherubim, and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life, to keep humanity from following in Osiris's footsteps, learning how to enter the afterlife and becoming immortal gods themselves. That's what this is all about. That is why they try to prevent Gentiles from procreating, from having children, from discovering ways to become immortal. They try to destroy all the order that provides sustenance, civilization, the pagan gods, idolatry, everything that represents anything intelligible and sustaining and good and true and beautiful. They try to ruin for the Gentiles, and they portray as evil everything that Osiris had accomplished for the Egyptians. They want to bring down and destroy because they worship Seth Typhon, who murders Osiris and prevents the Pharaoh from bringing Ma'at, bringing order to the Gentile peoples. So Eve fornicates with Osiris, Samael, with the serpent. The serpent itself is a very, very phallic image. And she does so because he gets her drunk on his wine. He is the god of wine and the god of fertility. Now, this comes from the oral traditions. The book of Genesis itself says that it's Adam who impregnates Eve. But Eve is only impregnated once when both Cain and Abel are born. They are born as twins, and they represent the twin kingdoms of Lower Egypt, of the Hyksos, which is Abel, the second born, and Cain, who represents the original Egyptians who maintain rule in the lower kingdom in the south of Egypt. Adam made love to his wife Eve because they were drunk, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel, his twin. Now, Abel kept flocks. Abel was the shepherd king. Abel was the Hyksos. And Cain worked the soil. He was like Adam. He planted a vineyard in the garden on the earth after they were expelled. He brought what the Jews perceived to be the evil from the Garden of Eden to the earth, and he offered up its fruits in the form of wine to the gods as a substitute for blood, which was the Egyptian practice. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil. He brought wine as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock, a blood offering. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry and his face was downcast. This is portraying the Egyptians offering up wine as a substitute for blood, and Abel the Hyksos coming in and taking over Egypt as the shepherd kings and offering up blood and commandeering the god Seth Typhon from the Egyptians and becoming his second chosen people. The Habiru, the Hebrews, come in behind the Hyksos and rule from behind the throne and help to open up the gates. So Abel has got to die for Seth to become the third chosen people of Seth Typhon. That's why Seth is named Seth. Abel, the Messiah, son of Joseph, Jesus Christ, has to be killed by Cain, the Egyptians, the Romans, the Americans, the Iranians, so that Seth can replace him. Messiah, son of Joseph, Jesus Christ, has to die so that Messiah, son of David, Jesus Barabbas, can replace him. The Joseph and the lost tribes of the Israelites have to be lost and die so that the Judahites can replace them. And it's story after story in the Bible follows this model that I go over in my book. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, if you make a blood sacrifice, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." That sin is the intoxication of wine. That sin is offering a scapegoat in the form of wine, which is shortchanging the gods of their blood. The blood contains the soul. The Egyptians believed that the earth was created with magic and that human beings were created with magic, and their blood has the soul of that magic that makes the god Shesmu, Una, Seth Typhon more powerful by consuming it because they incorporate it into their own inner magic and it makes them stronger. Human beings sacrifice to feed the gods. We are their slaves, and we provide them with the nourishment of the sacrifices we give. And wine shortchanges them. It intoxicates them. They don't like it. They prefer blood. They don't want Cain substituting wine for blood as the Egyptians did. The Greeks have a similar story of Prometheus teaching human beings to offer the gods bones instead of meat and shortchanging the gods. And that pissed off Zeus. And this story is repeated in this Judaic story, which came after the Egyptians and the Greeks. And the desires that he has are when he drinks that intoxicating aphrodisiac of wine. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field where he grows this wine, where the blood is spilled. And when the blood is spilled, up shoots the grapevines. I've got a lot about that in the book. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Abel must die so that Seth can replace him. The Hyksos have to go in order for the Habiru, the Judahites, to replace them and become the chosen people of Seth Typhon. Then the Lord God said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? I don't know, he replied. Am I my brother's keeper? That means, am I my brother's shepherd? And I explained all that. I don't want to digress too much and get into that now, but that's all explained in my book, which you can find at my website, CJBbooks.com. The Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. The ground is the altar. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. The ground is cursed by the grapevine because the grapevine makes human beings knowledgeable and the grapevine makes human beings lustful so that they procreate. That's why the ground gets cursed, so that it can't produce this grapevine. That's why there's the flood to eliminate all the grapevines, but Noah planted a vineyard. Samael Osiris planted the vineyard because he's the god of vegetation. He has green skin or black skin to represent the fertile soil of the Nile Valley. He's the god of wine. The ground is cursed to prevent all that from happening. So Cain planted the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the grapevine, on the earth, and again cursed the ground outside of paradise. The flood happened to cleanse it of all that, and then Noah goes and plants a vineyard and brings it back again. This is the recurring theme. And then Jesus offers his wine as a substitute for his blood, but then eventually his blood has to be spilled. The Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opens its mouth to receive your brother's blood, your twin brother. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land. I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer, a fugitive, and a vagabond on the earth. And whoever finds me will kill me. But the Lord said to him, not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. That mark is the cobra. The Zohar specifies, and I give the passages in the book, that it is a vav, a pictogram of the serpent. It is marking Cain as the Pharaoh of Egypt. A parasite does not kill off its host completely. It wants to continue to suck the blood off of the host. So Cain is not killed completely. The Egyptians did not disappear. It was the Hyksos who were killed off so that they could be replaced by Seth, by the Habiru. But the Egyptians are preserved so that they can tend the tree of the knowledge of good and evil until its fruit become ripened, so that they can be the shell, the husk of the fruit of the Jews and protect them, so that they can be the oyster shell around the divine spark of the Jews. They can be Amalek, the Kelly pot that protects and safeguards the Jews. So Cain is preserved as a host to serve the parasite, but Abel has to go. The 10 tribes have to be lost and killed off so that the Judahites prevail. The Samaritans, who are the 10 tribes, have to be weak and small, and their temple destroyed by John Bjerknes. And this theme occurs over and over again. And now we have the Ashkenazis playing this role of Abel, as I'll describe down the road. Cain made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Cain was then building a city. He's the Egyptians. He builds pyramids. He creates order. The Ben, the mound that formed into chaos. This is giving Ma'at, order, to the universe. This is the role of Cain. This was the role of Osiris. This is the role of Pharaoh. It is Seth who wants to destroy everything. But Seth, the younger brother of Cain, inherits all of these cities that he builds. And I give the passages in Deuteronomy 6 and Isaiah 61 where it talks about how Seth is going to inherit these cities because Esau is made the slave of Jacob. But you have to have the knowledge to build the cities. Lamech married 2 women. He gets punished more. Zillah also had a son, Tubal-Cain. I don't want to get into what the Freemasons say about Tubal-Cain. A cane is a firm stick, and then there's Tubal. You can take it from there, but that's what the Freemasons say about Tubal-Cain. But Tubal-Cain makes tools out of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain ripens the fruit of the tree of knowledge to create the nuclear weapons with which we are all going to kill each other off so that the enemy can inherit the world to come without us. That's another reason why Cain is preserved and not killed. Abel's got to go so that the Habiru can replace the Hyksos, so that the Judahites can replace the 10 lost tribes, so that Messiah, son of David, can take the place of Messiah, son of Joseph, after Messiah, son of Joseph does all the work, builds the empire, creates the appetite for the Messiah king, for the replacement Jewish Pharaoh, for the real Pharaoh, the Egyptian Pharaoh who gave true order of truth, beauty, and goodness to the world. The Jews are going to replace it with the Seth Typhon version of that, who brings chaos to the world and destroys everything. Adam made love to his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, saying, God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Seth also had a son and named him Enos. At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. They began to bray like donkeys to call Seth Typhon, the ass-headed god of Egypt, the Lord, because Seth, his namesake, Seth Typhon incarnate, had replaced Abel. And that theme goes over and over again in the Bible, as I explained in the book, and as I'm going to be explaining in future presentations. If you want to see those, be sure and get a subscription to my Substack account. I'm going to be diving very deeply into all these, and it's going to be paid only. if you're going to really want to learn the significance of all of these insights of mine and how they relate to our future and to our people and to our survival, I strongly recommend you get my book, which you can get at CJBbooks.com, Satan's Chosen People, and that you get a paid subscription so that you don't miss out on these explanations that I'm going to be giving. I'm really going to be diving deep into all this. This is extremely esoteric. This is all new insights that I'm the only one that has them and is providing them to humanity. And if you want to get that, please do get a paid subscription at CJBbooks.substack.com. You will also be helping to fund me to continue in this work. I have a sequence of other books. I have one following up on this book coming out soon and several other books. And I'm ultimately going to fulfill my full series on Satanic Secrets of Jesus Christ, where I really go hard into all this and show how the oral tradition of Judaism substantiates everything I say. But I go much further than they do. I really understand what all this truly represents. And I'm the first person in history who does. I understand it even better than the authors of the Torah, of the Septuagint, because I have the perspective of history and how all this played out. So I have all of that additional insight on top of what they originally intended. So again, it's very important to understand that Messiah, son of Joseph, has to die so that he can be replaced by Seth. The 10 lost tribes had to die. The Hyksos had to die so that the Habiru could become the chosen people, etc., etc., etc. So I always find the Zohar particularly interesting because it always proves what I figure out first, and then find passages in the Zohar that vindicate and justify what I've said. She, being Eve, took of its fruit and ate. We have learned she squeezed grapes. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is a grapevine, and she's making wine out of it, and offered them to him being Adam. And they inflicted death upon the whole world, for death abides in this tree, a tree ruling by night. That's the most ridiculous inversion of the story of Osiris that the Jews fabricated to vilify Osiris and vilify the Egyptians. Osiris was trying to bring humanity immortality. Wine, especially palm wine, is used in the mummification process. Wine is used as an aphrodisiac to make human beings fertile. Osiris wasn't trying to bring death. He was trying to conquer death. He was trying to create resurrection and an afterlife. And the Jews misrepresent all of that as if it were some evil action, because the Jews worship Seth Typhon, who loathes Osiris, who does not want human beings to become gods the way that Osiris had, does not want human beings to have children because Osiris with Isis produced Horus, who defeated Seth Typhon. Seth Typhon was sterile. Osiris seduced Seth Typhon's wife, Nephthys, to produce their child, Anubis, and he resented that adultery very strongly. Horus raped and castrated Seth Typhon the way that Noah was raped and castrated by his son Ham. When she rules, creatures of the world taste a taste of death, but those scions of faith first pledged their souls to him, and since pledged, the souls returned to their sights. So your faithfulness every night. The eyes of both of them were opened to perceive the evil of the world, etc. Again, this is a grapevine, and Eve is making wine to offer to Adam. This is from the Zohar, Volume 1, Folio 192a. That was the Zohar, Volume 1, Folio 36a to b. Come and see, Adam's wife squeezed grapes for him, bringing death upon him and upon the whole world. Look at how misogynistic that is, blaming a woman named Eve for the fact that human beings are not immortal and sometimes undergo pain in their lifetimes. All of that gets placed upon women somehow. Come and see, Adam's wife squeezed grapes for him, bringing death upon him and upon the whole world. Noah approached these grapes and did not guard himself properly. What is written, he drank of the wine and became drunk and exposed himself within his tent and was raped by his son Ham, and castrated by his son Ham. That's told in the Sanhedrin in the Talmud, Folio 70. The sons of Aaron drank wine of those grapes and brought an offering with that wine and died, as has been said. Therefore it is written, their grapes are grapes of poison, bitter clusters for them, since those grapes cause this. Again, remember the historical lineage that's being presented here. Adam and Eve given wine by Osiris Samael in the garden. Cain planting a vineyard and offering the substitute sacrifice of wine for blood, and the ground being cursed because of that and punished because of that. The ground of paradise being cursed, the serpent having to lick the dust, losing his legs, Osiris being bound because Seth Typhon murdered him and chopped him in pieces, and he had to be resurrected in mummy wrap. Just as in the end times, the devil will be bound and cast into hell. That is a symbol of Osiris being mummy wrapped and brought to the underworld. And then we had Noah, even after Seth Typhon tried to cleanse the world of this gift-giving wine that brings joy, that brings children, that brings knowledge, that brings civilization. He wants to get rid of that. But Noah betrayed that and planted the vineyard again at the instigation of Osiris. So we have the grape going from paradise to the earth with Cain, from Adam and Eve to the earth with Cain, the earth being cleansed of it, then Noah restoring it. And then we have Jesus Christ, the God of wine. Jesus is the serpent, Osiris, on the cross. The cross is the grapevine. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is also represented by the Jed pillar, which is part of the story of Osiris. Seth Typhon put him in a coffin and cast him out to sea, and he landed on Byblos in Lebanon and ran aground. And when he ran aground, a tree sprouted up around him, which encased him, which the king cut down and made into a pillar. And then Osiris rescued him from that pillar. That pillar is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Osiris is the serpent within that pillar, within that tree. Abel has to die so that Seth replaces him. Abel is the Messiah, son of Joseph. Joseph, the 10 tribes, the lost tribes, are the reincarnation of Abel, and they are sacrificed so that the Judahites, so that Seth can replace them. Jesus is Messiah, son of Joseph, who is sacrificed, so that Messiah, son of David, Jesus, Barabbas, can replace him. And that story is told in the original versions of Matthew chapter 27. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Now it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. They fabricated that. That wasn't true. At that time, they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Jesus Barabbas, Messiah, son of David, Seth, the Habiru. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them. Pilate is Cain. Pilate is the Romans, the Egyptians. "Which one do you want me to release to you? Jesus Barabbas, Messiah, son of David, Seth, or Jesus who is called the Messiah, Jesus Christ, who is able, who is the Messiah, son of Joseph?" For he knew it was out of self-interest that they had handed Jesus over to him. Sitting on an innocent man. "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they said. "Jesus, Barabbas, Messiah, son of David, Seth, the Judahites, not the one who came for the lost sheep of Israel, not for the reincarnation of Moses and Joseph, who are the reincarnation of Abel. They wanted Messiah, son of David, so Messiah, son of Joseph had to die so that Jesus Barabbas could replace him, just as Seth replaces Abel. Excuse me, it'll just take a second. God has granted me another child in the place of Abel. She named him Seth, as in Seth Typhon, to replace the Hyksos, to replace Abel, to replace the Messiah, son of Joseph, Jesus Christ. "What shall I do then with Jesus Christ, Jesus who is called the Messiah, Jesus Christ?" Pilate. Christ means Messiah, which means anointed, which in Hebrew is Mashiach. They all answered, "Crucify him." Why? What crime has he committed? But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him. I am innocent of this man's blood," just as Cain denies killing Abel. All the people answered, "His blood is on us and on our children." Then they released Barabbas to them. So Seth replaces Abel, Messiah, son of David. Jesus Barabbas replaces Messiah, son of Joseph, Abel, Jesus. The Roman Cain protests, "I am innocent of this man's blood. Am I my brother's keeper?" It's the same story being told over and over and over again, and Jesus is Samael, Osiris. I want to thank you all so very much for watching. If you want to learn more about this, please do pick up my book, Satan's Chosen People. You can find it at my website, CJBbooks.com. You'll be able to get it. It's available now, or will be available soon on Amazon. I'll probably post this video tomorrow. I'm completely exhausted, but I got it done. I want to thank everyone who is a paid subscriber at Substack. I'm going to have a tremendous amount of content going forward explaining all of this in much greater depth and detail. And I'm going to be showing you the primary sources that I use in my book. And there's a lot more to all this. I'm going to be delving into Christianity and deeply diving into Islam and how Islam relates to all this, where Jesus appears in the Quran as Samael, as Osiris. And I have passages which specifically equate Jesus to Osiris and Jesus to Samael. The people who wrote the Quran were obviously very much aware that Samael is Osiris and that Jesus is Samael, and that Samael was the serpent in the Garden of Eden. I want to thank you all so very much for watching. Again, if you want to see the deep dives into all this, please get a paid subscription at CJBbooks.substack.com. I want to thank all my paid subscribers for sticking by me these past couple of weeks, where I have been dedicated to getting this book written and published. It now is, and now I'm going to reward you with the most important content that any human being has ever created. I'm going to explain the Bible in a way no one else has ever understood, that is going to completely transform theology from this point forward. I'll see you all next time. Beware the world to come.